Good afternoon. House Taxation meeting will come to order. First item would be requests for bill introductions. Are there any requests? Seeing none at this time, we will open up the hearing. Well, actually, we never close the hearing, so we will continue our hearing on House Bill 2061. We did hear a fairly comprehensive overview from the reviser yesterday. Does anybody have any questions for the reviser? Today we are taking a look primarily at the corporate piece and the privilege tax piece of House Bill 2061. So are there any questions for the reviser pertaining to that? If there's none, additionally, we had the full overview of the fiscal note yesterday. Were there any further questions regarding the corporate piece on the fiscal note? Seeing none, we will jump right into the proponent section testimony of House Bill 2061 on the corporate and privilege tax components, and welcome first to committee Alex Orrell with the Kansas Bankers Association. Welcome to committee.
Good afternoon, committee. Good to see everybody. As I told the Commerce Committee yesterday, I am so happy to be testifying on something and talking about something not ESG, and I do mean that sincerely, so thank you for this opportunity. I am here to testify in support of HB 2061, and I'm going to specifically talk about Section 2 of the bill in regards to the privilege tax. A little background on the privilege tax: that is the income-derived tax for banks, savings and loans, and trust companies. Kansas banks, trust companies, and savings and loans do not pay Kansas corporate income tax. They pay what's called the privilege tax. And the reason being is the privilege tax taxes the interest income from U.S. Treasury and agency securities, where corporate does not. So that difference in the taxation rate between the two is to reflect that difference in taxation, because it is a lower rate. It is 4.375% for banks, 4.5% for savings and loans and trust companies. And it's actually a two-tiered rate. There is a base rate, primary rate, it's 2.25% on income, the first $25,000 income. And then there's what's called the surtax. That is on top of that, that gets it to that's 4.375 and 4.5 respectively. So I want to address that, because when you see in the bill the rate reduction here for the privilege tax portion, it's meant to be a corresponding rate reduction that is the exact same from corporate. So it might be a weird number in there. I believe it's you'll see 0.88 and maybe I can't remember 0.91 or something, something around there. The reason being is that is the surtax number, but the overall rate is to reflect that reduction from corporate to the privilege. Not asking for anything more, anything less, just trying to apply that exact same percentage decrease to the privilege tax. We are supportive of the underlying bill and some tax relief for our business partners and folks that are Kansans. Understand there's going to need to be some significant work as this goes. I think this is the first real hearing trying to address major tax policy. But bottom line, just want to be at the table, want to be helpful. Banks are businesses too. We are just subject to a different tax rate. So we'd respectfully request, if there is a reduction, that we would also be included in that. Want this committee to know we're also working on the Apex bill from yesterday. Commerce had a bill, a trailer bill. We might have something here on that as well. When you passed the Apex last year, privilege was left out. Intentions was to give corporate relief there. And we had many conversations with some on this committee about doing some sort of trailer bill towards the end of session. But as it got rushed through quickly, didn't know if we had Apex. So we did not, push that because we didn't know if we were even going to get it. So we are working with revisers currently on the Commerce Committee on this side, but this could easily come up in this major tax discussion too. And the bottom line is to just apply that same intent of that legislation that was intended to give business relief to other businesses too. So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time of this committee. I know you got a lot to do this year, and I wish you good luck, and I'm here as a resource.
Thank you for your testimony. Committee, we'll go ahead and take questions after each conferee. Are there any questions for Mr. Orrell? Representative Sawyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alex, I agree the privilege tax ought to be treated the same way as the corporate tax. If we make a reduction in corporate tax, privilege tax ought to go down by a corresponding amount. But what I don't understand in the bill, and maybe try to explain this to me, it looks like the privilege tax goes down percentage-wise a lot more than the corporate tax, because the bill takes the corporate tax from 7% to 5%. But the privilege tax is going from, like, for example, on the bank, 2.125 to 0.88. So that seems like a significant percentage-wise, it's a much bigger reduction. So what am I missing?
Sure. Yeah, no, great question, Representative. The tax is two-tiered. That 2.25 is the primary rate. That surtax gets it to 4.375 for a total global rate.
Okay, so
A
you're not
seven,
changing the surtax at all.
just the surtax piece, but overall, it's still the global rate. So if you take, 4.375, you apply the 28.57% reduction. If you take that from 4.375, it gets it to 3.13 total for banks and 3.21 for savings. So the global rate is the reflection of that. That primary tax is just for the first $25,000 income. Those banks are still going to pay that surtax. So it's just the global rate.
All right, great. Thank you. That was confusing me.
That was a question I had too, so. Committee, are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to welcome next to committee Dan Murray with NFIB. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Dan Murray. I'm the Kansas State Director for the National Federation of Independent Business. Our organization represents small businesses, nearly 4,000 from across the state, all kinds of small businesses. And I'm not sure, due to scheduling, certainly we have a position in support of this bill for both the individual and corporate rates. But as I'll mention here shortly, most small businesses file at the individual level, but we do have members that file at the corporate level. So we support both of those facets. I just want to point out in 2022, there were more than 258,000 small businesses in Kansas. That represents about 99.1% of all firms in Kansas. Of those small businesses, they employ over 600,000 employees, and that's just over half the workforce. So Kansas and Kansas small businesses are really fed by, and the backbone is fed by small businesses. So certainly tax policy impacts Kansas small businesses directly, and taxes matter to small businesses. In our most recent small business problems and priorities, 4 of the top 10 problems were tax related, not only in terms of rate, but also complexity. We think that this bill addresses both the rate, obviously, allowing small businesses to reinvest in their employees and benefits and reinvest in their capital, but also makes the tax code simpler. As you can imagine, some of you are small business owners. You don't have in-house CPAs, in-house tax counsel. So keeping the code as simple as possible, moving to one rate certainly achieves that goal. I think, again, as I pointed out, most small business owners are pass-through entities, 75% in fact. So the individual, of course, is important, but then, of course, we support the corporate rate. I think you had a lot of robust debate and discussion yesterday on this issue, so I'm probably covering some of the same ground, but wanted to be heard and emphasize that this is an important priority for small business. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you for your testimony. And yeah, so far we've gotten off easy here, but committee, are there any questions? Representative Sawyer.
Okay, you say represent small business, but wouldn't a number of those small businesses actually get a tax increase under this bill? Because right now they may be paying at the 4% rate, and now they'd go up to 5%.
I'm not.
Small corporations. I mean, right now, the first 50,000 is taxed at 4%, and then we add a 3% surcharge. This bill just sets it at 5%. So you would have some small businesses that would actually get a tax increase under this bill.
It's possible. I want to emphasize again that my priority certainly is on more of the individual level with the majority of our firms filing at that level. But I guess I would say in general, the reduction in the corporate rate by and large for most corporations would be beneficial. And I think I failed to mention in my comments that, importantly contained in this legislation is that trigger mechanism to draw that down further over time so that hopefully we achieve further reductions in the corporate rate as well.
Thank you.
Committee, any further questions? Boy, these guys are getting off real easy today. Okay, Representative Epley.
Thank you. This is to segue off of Representative Sawyer's question. What percentage of businesses would see, do you have any idea? Small business, I mean, is it 5%, 3%? What percent are going to see an increase? Do you have any idea?
I don't, Mr. Chairman. I think I'd have to refer to the Department of Revenue. They probably have a better grasp on that. I would be limited into, maybe surveying my membership, and that wouldn't necessarily be accurate. So I'd have to defer to the Department of Revenue.
Yeah, I've had that question too, is how many fall within that range that just pay the base tax rather than surtax? And Eddie looks like he's working intently here. So maybe he's looking at that. He says, give me a minute. So, because you're correct that surtax kicks in after the $50,000 limit or threshold there. So we'll see if we can get an answer to that. Any further questions for Mr. Murray? See none. Thank you for your testimony.
As Mr. Orr said, I appreciate the attentiveness this committee has on tax policy. I know it's a big year on tax issues, and we appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to welcome Eric Stafford. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thanks for having us back. Eric Stafford with the Kansas Chamber on the corporate provisions of House Bill 2061. So pointing out, keeping it short today, obviously we discussed the rate reductions, takes this on the corporate side from 7% to 5%. The chart included on page 2 of our testimony it comes from the most recent state tax climate for the Tax Foundation. And you'll notice that we have made some considerable improvements in our corporate ranking. We were 35th in the nation, according to the Tax Foundation, back in 2014, and our current ranking is 21st and has been for the last 2 years. A lot of that was the Wayfair decision, the decoupling on guilty provisions, expensing, just some of the tax policies that have taken place really in 2020, 2021 that was passed and became law by the legislature and governor. So do appreciate your support for those, and we continue to make strides in improvement. Probably the one thing to note, I know we talked about our neighbors and where do they stack up in terms of rates on the personal income tax side yesterday and today. If we were to drop our corporate rate to 5%, as proposed in the bill, that would be the second lowest corporate rate in the region behind Colorado, that's currently at 4.63%. So it would definitely put us in a competitive position, plus the growth trigger, as discussed yesterday, allowing future buy downs. The trigger that was put into place in 2013 in North Carolina, their corporate rate is currently down to 2.5% and could expire. I think in conversations I was having with folks this fall, they could expire this year or next year to be fully eliminated. So they continue to bring their personal rates down. Their personal rates used to be very high, but their personal rates are down to I think 5 or 5.25% right now, and again continuing to be bought down through growth over time in that state as well. So, but you see, North Carolina used to be, in the mid 40s in terms of their national ranking, and since 2013 they've been a top 10 state. There's been a couple of years that they've been ranked number 1. I think their most recent ranking was 9 or 10, but definitely a very competitive state, a very high growth state right now. So that is really all I have to say on the corporate income tax side, Mr. Chairman, but be happy to answer questions from the committee.
Thank you, Eric. I had a question. In your study of kind of some of our surrounding states, does anybody else do the kind of the base and then the surtax? Is it a single rate? Do they have brackets?
Yeah. I was talking to somebody this morning in Senate Tax, and I said, well, just download the Tax Foundation Facts and Figures app. And so they started searching and couldn't find it. And I started searching and couldn't find it. I'm like, well, I got it on my phone. So maybe they've pulled it as they come out with their 2023 version. I don't know. But I still have it, and it still seems to function. So yeah, Arkansas has so I'm looking at corporate. Arkansas has 6 tiers. Missouri's at 4%. So, and Missouri has just enacted income tax reduction within the last session or two. It might have been last year. So they have drawn their rates down recently. They used to be higher than us on the corporate side. Nebraska is a two-tiered structure, 5.58 and 7.81. And then Oklahoma is just a flat 6%. And then Colorado at 4.63. So 3 out of the 5 are tiered, and then the others are flat.
Okay. Committee, any further questions? Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know there's been some work done on tax policy at the individual level and population migration. Do you have any idea, maybe at the business level, if we get more competitive, how that might benefit Kansas as far as new businesses moving here?
Yeah, and I don't have anything directly in front of me. And even just this weekend, saw some reports. I mean, the fastest growing states are those without income taxes. And some of those states, Florida doesn't have personal income taxes. They do have corporate income taxes, but that's my understanding currently being discussed to reduce and or eliminate down there as well. But yeah, the business activity is definitely higher. I would agree that you can look at the trends of growth and the states that have the corporate income tax structure. I think Catherine's comments a week or two ago were that, ultimately those are just pass-throughs to the consumer, and people will pay more. I don't have anything directly in front of me, but I can find where I was looking and get you some information. But yeah, the states that don't have income taxes, they're the fastest growing states right now. Utah has a very low tax burden. Yeah.
Thank you.
Committee, any further questions? Going once, no. Okay. Seeing none.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will add, I did see an article this morning on CBS News that 21 states have reduced income taxes in the last 2 years. So states that are also experiencing, again, I think I've testified before this committee, when I talk to my counterparts on national calls, every state is experiencing record revenue. And we have almost half of those states using those revenues to start to buy down personal and corporate income tax rates. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And committee, Eddie said that he had a question or an answer to Representative Epley's question.
So this is data from the department's most recent annual report, but it actually reflects returns processed in calendar year 2020. So it's corporate tax year doesn't actually work the exact same way that the individuals do necessarily. But the corporate income tax filers is not really a normal distribution of the data. Of the almost 33,000 filers, more than 20,000 of those have no taxable income. And so they would see no impact in essence by this change. Another 8,600 so about 26% have taxable income between $0 and $75,000. And with the combined effect of the rate changes and where the surcharge starts right now, $75,000 is the kind of break even point. So that's about 61% are unaffected, about 26.4% are below that break even point. But those 26.4% make up less than 1% of the total corporate income tax liability. It's a exceedingly top heavy distribution within the corporate income tax.
Thank you. Any questions on that, committee? Representative Sawyer.
I'm trying to do the math in my head. So 26.8% will get an increase. 61% would be unaffected. Is that what you said? So that means about 12% would benefit from, in terms of not just the number of corporations that would benefit from this.
Yeah, I think it would be between 12 and 13% of the corporations that make up the 99% of the corporate income tax liability.
Okay, thank you.
I know from studying corporate income tax, it's very unequally distributed. Okay. If there's no further questions, I do not show any more conferees appearing before the committee as proponents. Is there anyone else wishing to testify as a proponent on the corporate piece or privilege tax piece for 2061? Seeing none, we will open up the opponent testimony and welcome first to committee Paula Neff. Is Paula here? Not seeing anyone. We'll move next to Emily Fetch. Welcome back to the committee.
Good afternoon, Chairman Smith and members of the committee. I'm Emily Fetch, the Director of Fiscal Policy at Kansas Action for Children. Thank you for another opportunity to testify in opposition to House Bill 2061. I'll try and keep my comments brief since you've already heard from me. We oppose the corporate part of this proposal because this is another change to the corporate income tax that would make the tax code even more upside down in favor of non-Kansas residents. As my written testimony outlines, the corporate portion of this bill would overwhelmingly benefit non-Kansas residents, with over 80% of the dollars in the corporate portion going to these out-of-state tax filers. This means that non-Kansans would avoid their tax obligations to Kansas while removing substantial revenue to make investments in our schools, roads, public health, and safety that build a strong Kansas economy. In the last few years, there have been multiple policy changes that have allowed corporations doing business in Kansas to reduce their contributions to the state. This has looked like the GILTI legislation, as well as the corporate tax cut components of last year's APEX legislation. With a second deal now in the works, the corporate income tax could be reduced from 4% to 3% by July 2024. Kansas Action for Children opposes a flat tax like House Bill 2061 because it equates to yet another large tax break for corporations, including many non-Kansas residents, while the list of investments and state needs remains unaddressed. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Emily. Committee, are there any questions? I think everybody wants to get out early tonight. Okay, Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for your testimony, Emily. So in your testimony, and as you stated, if non-Kansas entities are, let's say, receiving the biggest proportion of the tax breaks, I guess, does that mean that they are also employing a significant amount of Kansans? Would you say?
Well, I mean, the way that the tax is calculated right now looks at sales and payroll. I mean, like, there's a variety of factors, so I don't know. That might be a question for the Department of Revenue to figure out the relationship between the employment. Yeah.
And I guess just my thought would be that if non-Kansas companies are receiving these breaks, but employing people in Kansas, then if we cut their taxes, maybe they have an opportunity to employ more people in Kansas who, while maybe the corporate isn't paying tax on that, the individuals would be, and then also being able to spend money. So just a thought in my mind. So thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you for your testimony. Next, welcome John Lee. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Chairman Smith and committee members. My name is John Lee. For this bill, we have two concerns. One is still this bill will cut and reduce in the tax revenue. It's about the 180 million. And also another concern is for small business, and this bill will increase small business such as like 50K, and will increase 500. And for the 500 million, so that is a tax will decrease 10 million. A better in business or corporation, the tax plan is to have the relatively low in the bottom tax rate, which encourage more people to start a new business, also attract more business from outside. And because the small business hire many people, also is contributor to our economic development, and also contributor to our state tax revenue. Middle size and large size business is more stable, so it can affordable to pay relatively high tax rate. Like Arkansas they had the tax rate from the 1% to before is 1% to 6.5%. Then they reduced the top rate from 6.5% to 5.3%. But they have 5 tax brackets, so that'll be more complex. So for example, under for Kansas right now we have bottom tax rate is 4%. We reduce to 3% with neutral tax revenue. So is 3% still lower than Missouri and Oklahoma? They have 4%. Yesterday, and people asked what is and how to have a fair and efficient tax system. And this topic related to many factors. And we have a research paper and discuss that. And for example, with our existing tax systems, lawmakers need to consider different tax bracket number. And for example, for past 100 years, Kansas have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8 tax brackets numbers. Also, and the lawmaker need to consider a taxable income range, tax rate, and tax formula, also tax revenue at the same time. So this is why make our tax system so complex. If we fix, for example, like under two brackets, also we set the taxable income range, for example, like 100,000. So that is a way can a lawmaker to focus only to consider 3 tax rates: bottom tax rate, top, and middle. So then in tax revenue can be calculated with 2 formulas. Not like right now we have, if the figure out is fiscal notes, we need to use like 6 formulas. If like for withholding, we need to have 48 formula and something like that. So in the flat tax rate in such like 5% is too simple, too rough, and unreasonable to cover different taxable income. And one fair and simple and linear formula can be used to resolve our corporate tax in the province. And for example, our Social Security our Social Security bill. We have 8 bills since 2019. Finally, we recognize to use one simple linear formula to resolve our Social Security problems. So for corporation tax, and we recommend also use one simple linear formula plus one existing formula to resolve our problems. Thank you very much. I stand for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Committee, are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you again for your testimony.
Thank you.
I will go back to Paula Neff. Oh, yes, Emily?
I believe Paula's testimony is written only.
Okay, just wanted to double check and make sure that I hadn't missed somebody. Okay, thank you for that. Committee, that concludes our conferees as opponents. Is there anyone else wishing to testify as an opponent or neutral on House Bill 2061? Seeing none, we will now close the hearing on House Bill 2061. Now, committee, we do have some time. I had several bills that I had given you a couple of days ago to kind of keep on your list. I think we'll try to go ahead and take a look at some of those. Just sequentially, I'll take them in order, and we'll start off with House Bill 2011. That was an income tax subtraction modification for members of the armed forces. And I'll let everyone bring their files up on their computers and have the reviser give us an overview on that. Yes, House Bill 2011. January 30th was the date that hearing was held. Adam, at your leisure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2011 would provide a Kansas income tax subtraction modification starting in tax year 2023 for compensation of members of the armed forces. Under the bill, all compensation received by an individual for serving in the armed forces, whether in active, reserve, or National Guard service, would be eligible for the subtraction modification.
Thank you. Committee, are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Butler, or Representative Butler, sorry.
Just a comment on the bill itself. I had a chance this weekend to talk with Lieutenant General Wiggins about this bill, and we were discussing the movement of soldiers and I'm having been one of those soldiers that was when I joined the military. We moved to our residency to a state where I had my first duty assignment. I stayed there because there was no taxes, and being able to keep those soldiers residents in the state of Kansas, there's a greater probability, hopefully, that they would return back to Kansas. Plus, it keeps their residency in the state of Kansas. We're working to build workforce in our state. What we want is to keep those soldiers here as best we can, and their residency here, so that they can pay those taxes and will continue. On this one, they would be without those taxes while they're active duty or in the reserves or National Guard. So it's a win-win, I believe, for the state of Kansas.
Thank you. Committee, any further discussion or any amendments? Representative Awerkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I appreciate, obviously, the intent of the bill, but I think when it comes to income taxes, we can make an argument for many different groups of individuals throughout the entire state on why it's really important that we can carve them out. And ultimately, income taxes are spread across everybody. So we're going to start with this group. We're going to go to another group, another group, another group, another group. It'd be one thing if we were taxing only this group of individuals and nobody else. Then I think that would be a good cause to say, hey, we should not tax them if we're not taxing anybody else. But once we start carving out, we've seen that with so many other elements of the tax code. Everybody's going to come line up and say we should be carved out too. So I'll be voting against this, but I do believe the better policy is to lower the tax rate on every Kansan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, any further discussion? Representative Bergkamp.
I just second what Representative Averkamp said. I feel the same way, so thank you.
Representative Beeler.
I'll, I guess, respond by, reacting to what Representative Butler talked about. And I would just suggest, if you had ever driven through a military community in the state, the two of the primary ones would be Junction City and see what's around Fort Riley, and you come to my community in the Leavenworth Lansing area, you're going to see license plates with, especially in Leavenworth, virtually every state in the union that has an Army post in it. And I can tell you again, those soldiers maintain a residence outside of the state of Kansas because of Kansas policy. My son-in-law did it. My son did it. It's because they get advantages by being a resident of the state of Texas and other places. So again, it's a consideration. I certainly respect everybody's opinion, and certainly the argument about carve-outs is one. But in the absence of that, and I look at the 1% of this country that serves and has served in the uniforms of our armed forces, something I'll be supporting. Thank you.
Representative Stogstill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have never voted against a veterans bill as long as the 7 years I've been here, but I plan to vote no on this, and not because I'm against the overall idea, but I think when we have people retiring on who are probably 07 and above, who are retiring on over $100,000 a year, those are not the kind of people that we necessarily need to be helping with an income tax deduction. I would be very willing to look at this if it just included enlisted and maybe even 01 or 02. But I think after you get to that, the retirement benefits, both in income and other benefits for retired military, it would be very hard for me to go home and tell my teachers, I'm sorry, but I voted for this for somebody who's making over $100,000 a year in retirement, and I'm still wanting you to pay income tax. So I would be voting no on this if there was an opportunity to put our enlisted people maybe in some kind of a bill like this that probably make at least the higher ranking enlisted people somewhere along the line of what we pay our teachers. I would probably be very willing to look at that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Butler.
And again, I appreciate the communication on this, but I think retirees retirees receive no state tax income, and then our state taxes in the state of Kansas. So we're talking about active duty reserves and National Guardsmen who are serving their country. They're deploying around the world, doing whatever they need to do to put themselves in harm's way, which is really a small percentage wise nationwide of the amount of soldiers that are the amount of people that are there. We're talking about a small section of the state of Kansas, and we wanted to keep families here in the state of Kansas, wanted to grow our work population, and this is just a small segment of that ability. And regardless of pay grade, E1 through 09, it's not unheard of around we have other states in the nation that do this because they know the importance of our military services.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion on House Bill 2011. Representative Epley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move that we pass out House Bill 2011 favorably for passage.
Okay, and a second from Representative Butler. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the Epley motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no.
No.
The noes appear to have it. The noes do have it. Division?
Yeah.
Okay. Division's been called. All those in favor of the Epley motion to recommend favorably for passage, please raise your hand. And those opposed, please raise your hand. With 9 in favor and 11 opposed, the motion fails. This time we'll take a look now at House Bill 2036. This is a property tax exemption for retired and disabled veterans. And I would look again to the revisor's office for an overview on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you stated, House Bill 2036 would provide a property tax exemption from a person's homestead commencing in 2024 for certain disabled and retired and disabled veterans. There's kind of a table going from 60% of such homesteads assessed value for a disabled veteran who has a disability rating of at least 30% but less than 40% from a service-connected disability, going up to 70% if the disability rating is 40 to 50, then 80% of the value if the disability rating is 50 to 60, then 90% of the value if the disability rating is 60 to 70. There'd be a full property tax exemption for a disabled veteran who is permanently confined to a wheelchair or who has a disability rating of at least 70%. Lastly, there would be a full exemption for a disabled veteran who is 65 years of age or older. And then lastly, a provision of the bill would a surviving spouse of a qualifying individual would be entitled to the exemption until such surviving spouse remarries.
Thank you. Committee, any questions for the reviser about the bill? If not, I will open it up for discussion. Representative Butler.
So again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is another bill that is pro-veteran within our communities. There are a number of veterans across the state who are disabled that are living on the incomes that may be less than if they could work. This is an opportunity to provide them that additional income out of pocket where they could use for day-to-day expenses. I've had an opportunity to speak to one city manager, one of our areas, the largest population of veterans in the area. And although he said, there's a little pushback from him because it's property taxes, but he would in turn support because of military. So.
Representative Beeler.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to add to it, I mean, if you look at this is graduated, so depending on the percent of the disability, the benefit there's a correlation to that. So I think take that into consideration. I would echo again what Representative Butler talked about. It's an opportunity for us to recognize the sacrifices of our disabled veterans. Thank you.
Representative Corbett.
I kind of echo the last comments. I have people in my constituency who have served their country. They're retired and they're barely making it right now. And it'd be nice for what years they have left to kind of give them a little better way of living. Thank you.
Representative Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am also in favor of this bill. I do have an amendment to offer to the committee that would be basically removing the marriage penalty as it now exists. A surviving spouse has incentive to not remarry in order to keep the benefits. I think that would it would be more pro-marriage, pro-family if we were able to remove that marriage penalty with minimal effect fiscally. Thank you.
Okay, committee, we will wait until that's distributed out, and then I'll call for a second on the Bryce amendment. Okay, looks like everyone's had a copy or had a chance to get a copy of the extensive amendment. No, I'm just kidding. Fairly simple amendment, straightforward. Representative Bryce, do you feel like you've explained it adequately?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have nothing else to add. Thank you.
Okay. Second, Representative Epley for the second, and for discussion. Any discussion on the Bryce amendment? Representative Beeler.
Just a bit of a note here on what this language appears to me to be. This is under the military speak. This is the survivor's benefit plan, and I'm looking over to my former Army co-person. This is guaranteed under. I think the reason the language is in here in the first place is because it matches the military survivor's benefit plan. In the event that the veteran dies, those benefits transfer to their spouse, and this is just confirmation. Is that the way you're reading this, Nate?
Representative Butler.
So the survivor benefit plan is a benefit of the military. If you elect to do that, you have to elect upon retirement, and it provides based on a certain amount of money that you put into an account that allows that to be able to provide it for the spouse. So this one, it's a great survivor benefit is one of those areas where many spouses live on that and they expect that when they retire, and it's a good benefit for them. And may I go ahead and address the question here on this, or do you want to just on that?
Representative Beeler yields the floor,
I yield the floor. I just wanted to make sure that I think the language we're reading here is the military survivors benefit plan, and this would be contrary to that plan, correct? Okay, thank you. I yield the floor.
Okay. Yes, Representative Butler.
Again, this being a benefit with the military, spouses are moved around the country and around the world for depending on how many years that they serve. My wife served beside me for 22 years in the military, moved several times, and several times we moved within 6 months of each time we moved. And so there are those times there. And I think that this is an opportunity to recognize those wives and know that the sacrifices they gave in support of their spouses, or, and it could be the other way, but I think this is a bill that we need to keep as written without the amendment.
Committee, any further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In light of what we've heard, I'd like to withdraw my amendment. Thank you.
Okay. Is that okay with the second? Okay. Okay, the Bryce amendment has been withdrawn, and we are back on the underlying bill. Any further discussion on House Bill 2036? Representative Averkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's obviously getting more and more difficult to oppose these bills because of the content, but for the same reasons as the prior bill, right? This is just another carve out. We're going to see these continue to increase if this passes. And go the past few years in the tax committee, we've been able to hold off on certain carve outs on property tax relief. Everybody needs it. Everybody wants it. And I think the better policy is to look at property tax relief for every Kansan. We did that last year, I believe, through increasing the part of the assessed value, which is not taxed. We have an opportunity to give property tax relief to every Kansan. I think that's a better policy. As much as I'd like to vote for this, I'm not going to, because I think there's better policy out there that'll help every Kansan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Butler, and then Stogstill.
This past weekend, I had a meeting with a retired colonel in Junction City, and he approached me on this very bill that he had read on. He said, I just want to let you know that in my neighborhood, around there, we've had 12 families leave upon retirement from their home because they were not going to receive the benefit of it for the disability, and they moved to places like Texas and Florida. My brother moved 3 years ago to Texas. He's 75% disabled from Agent Orange of Vietnam. And I think he gets something there around 70 or 80% of his property taxes are waived. And it could be a little more than that. I don't have the exact number. This is a benefit that will help keep those soldiers and those families in this state. And if we're looking for workforce, this is an opportunity for us to help to continue growing our workforce and maintain our workforce.
Representative Stogstill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I basically agree with Representative Averkamp, but in this one, I will definitely be voting in favor of this bill. A lot of our people who deserve property tax relief in this state are fully capable of working. They're not disabled, that sort of thing, and that's something that we definitely need to address, I think, in this committee. But these are people who are disabled defending our country, and I think that they do deserve some special recognition here, and I would hope that people would vote in favor of this. Thank you.
Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And last year I had an opportunity to do a little bit of work around the subject on a different committee, but I tend to support the veterans who'd be 100% disabled, or ones who I feel, definitely couldn't work and need help. But I think there's also many other first responders who aren't military who probably would be the same rating as some of these listed on here. So I just think it's not fair to other Kansans necessarily that we're benefiting one group versus another. And again, I think there's some within this bill I would support, but to me, it's too expansive the way that's written today, and I just can't support that. So thank you.
Representative Sanders.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect to my colleague, he's right. We do need to do something about property taxes, but that's not the question that's before us today. The question is, do we need to do something for disabled veterans? Can we do that today? And the answer is yes, we can do that today, and I'll be supporting this.
Seeing no further discussion, I would entertain a motion on House Bill 2036. Representative Epley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move that we pass out House Bill 2036 favorably as presented.
And a second from Representative Stogstill. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the Epley motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion carries. Looking at the time, our next bill would be House Bill 2135.
2135.
And I'll turn to the revisor's office for an overview on that while we're locating the files.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2135 would provide for an income, privilege, and premium tax credit for contributions to eligible charitable organizations operating pregnancy centers or residential maternity facilities. The tax credit would equal to 70% of the amount contributed during the taxable year by a taxpayer to an eligible charitable organization. For unused credits, the credit may be used up to the next 5 tax years. No single eligible charitable organization may receive credits in excess of $5 million in one tax year. Additionally, the total amount of credits allowed per tax year would be $10 million. Taxpayers would be required to apply to the Department of Revenue prior to making a contribution. The department would then allocate the credits based off of the amount of contributions certified in the application. And then the taxpayer would have 90 days to make the contribution, or the allocation of the tax credit would be canceled.
Adam, I apologize. I should have asked you ahead of time, so maybe you were prepared. Is that 70% level, is that high or low compared to other tax credit programs? Do you know that off the top of your head? Or perhaps research can get that for us. I know we've got something there at 50%. I know there are some 70%. I couldn't remember if there was anything much higher than that. And we can get back to that too. Committee, were there any questions for the revisor on the bill? If not, I'll go ahead and open it up to discussion, and then once we have an answer on that, perhaps we can move forward. Is there any discussion, committee? Representative Sawyer.
Yeah, actually, a 70% tax credit is extremely high, and it is pretty rare, particularly when you're dealing with charitable organizations, because the reality is anybody that's in the 35% or higher tax bracket, because it's a charitable contribution, not only do they get the 70% tax credit at the state level, they'll get deducted on their federal income taxes, and they'll get 35% or higher of it. So they get more than 100% back. So that's why we don't normally, if it's a charitable, do a 7% tax credit. A 30 or 50% would be more common. So I'll just point that out, that we're actually giving, there will be people, they actually, for example, they give a $10,000 contribution, they get the $7,000 tax credit from the state, they'd get a $3,500 or higher off their federal income tax. So they're getting $10,500 back for a $10,000 contribution. That's the way this could work.
Not to put any pressure on staff here. Okay.
So Kansas has 9 of these kind of contribution style tax credits. I'm not referring to all 47 tax credits, but the ones where it's a credit in exchange for a contribution made. 9 of those credits, they are, and I'm just going to read off these percentages really quickly. I'm not going to go into the details of the credits, but that's 25%, 75%, 60%, 50%, 50%, 50%, 75%, 70%, and 70%.
And to Representative Sawyer's point, those would be tax credits that are a contribution to a charitable organization, or do you know if there's those? You said they're contributions, but is it?
So the 75%, the one that is higher, is for contributions to individual development account reserve funds. I don't think that would be a charitable organization that would be a deductible expense at the a higher level though. But most of those are charitable type I'm hesitant to say most. Several of those are contributions to tax deductible organizations. Yes.
All right, committee, is there any discussion on House Bill 2135? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion on House Bill 2135. Representative Sanders.
Mr. Chairman, I move that when we vote on House Bill 2135, we pass it out favorably.
And a second from Representative Wassinger. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the Sanders motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. Division's been called. All in favor of the Sanders motion, please raise your hand and hold it up for a little bit. And those opposed, please raise your hand. On the count of 12 to 8, the motion carries. And I apologize, I didn't ask if anyone wanted to have their vote recorded on the prior motions. Is there anyone that wishes to have their vote recorded? Representative Haswood, Sawyer, Stogstill, Clayton, Alcala, Miller, Sanders. Yes, Sanders was in the affirmative. Okay, thank you, committee. And the motion carries. Our last two bills, actually, just stand at ease for just a second.
Kind of predictable.
Okay, we're going to take a look at House Bill 2176. That was the Library District Authority for Arc City. I don't know that we need a reviser's review on that. If anybody wants one, we can do that, but we'll go ahead and open that bill up. Are there any discussion points or amendments?
Knock yourself.
I just wanted to double check with the reviser first before I made this motion, but I would like to amend the contents of House Bill 2205, which was the Udall Library District. So we've got two library districts kind of in the same area. Makes sense to combine those into the same bill. I promise I'm not getting on the bundling streak here. This is just two bills here. Very similar content, so I would like to propose that as a conceptual amendment. Second from Representative Helgerson. Any discussion on the Smith amendment? Seeing none, all those in, Representative Hoheisel, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just floating this out there, wouldn't be easier to pass these two and just putting them on consent?
We could not do the amendment if we
did
consent calendar.
Yeah, and just throw them both on consent.
Typically, tax bills don't have a very good history of consent calendar.
Okay. No problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I do appreciate the expediency, though. Representative Clayton.
Just a point of clarification for my notes. What's the bill number for the other one? I have 2176 being combined with
2205.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on combining the two? Representative Sawyer.
So what would be the bill? Why don't we combine into which ones?
We are amending 2205 into 2176.
So we'll have to 2176. Okay.
Yes, that's correct. Seeing none, I will close on the amendment and move my amendment. Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. And any further discussion on the bill, House Bill 2176 as amended? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion on 2176. Representative Wassinger. Okay. Representative Hoheisel? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we pass out HB 2176 favorably.
Do I have a second? Second from Representative Epley. You've heard the motion from Representative Hoheisel to recommend favorably. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. That concludes our business for the day. Thank you everyone for all your work, and we'll see you tomorrow. We are adjourned.